The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the saloon, and Wilhelmina Bennett stepped down into the dust of Vulture City, Arizona. Her worn blue calico dress hanging loose on her thin frame, the fabric so faded and threadbare that the original pattern was barely visible anymore. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the mining town in the summer of 1878, and she stood there with nothing to her name except the clothes on her back, and a small cloth bundle that held only a broken hairbrush and a tarnished locket containing her mother's faded photograph. She had traveled from St. Louis after her father's death left her destitute, the boarding house owner selling everything they owned to cover his debts, and she had used her last coins for the stagecoach fare west with promises from a distant cousin of work in a respectable household. But when she arrived asking for Mrs. Dorothy Sullivan, the saloon keeper simply shook his head and said the woman had died of fever 2 months prior. Wilhelmina stood frozen in the street, feeling the curious and assessing stares of miners and townspeople alike. She was 23 years old, and for the first time in her life, she was completely alone with no prospects and no shelter. The enormity of her situation pressed down on her shoulders as heavily as the oppressive heat. She had no money for return passage, no family to wire for help, and no idea where she would sleep that night. "You looking for work, miss?" A voice called from across the street, and Wilhelmina turned to see a painted woman in a scarlet dress leaning against the doorframe of what was obviously a brothel. The woman's eyes were not unkind, but Wilhelmina felt her stomach turn at the implication. "Thank you, but no," Wilhelmina said quietly, trying to keep her voice steady even as panic clawed at her throat. She walked slowly down the main street, past the assay office and the general store, past the blacksmith shop where the ring of hammer on anvil created a rhythmic percussion in the hot air. Vulture City was a gold mining town, rough and dusty, filled with men seeking fortune and women seeking survival. The mountains rose in the distance, bare and brown, and everywhere she looked, she saw the evidence of hard living and harder people. Wilhelmina paused in front of the general store, reading the notices posted on the wooden board outside. Someone needed help with laundry. Another wanted a cook for a mining camp 20 miles out. But each notice required experience she did not have or transportation she could not afford. Her throat felt tight with unshed tears, but she refused to cry in the middle of this street where everyone could see her desperation. "You all right, miss?" The voice came from beside her, deep and genuinely concerned. Wilhelmina turned to find herself looking up at a tall man in dusty work clothes, a worn cowboy hat shading his face from the brutal sun. He was perhaps 27 or 28, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. His eyes were a striking gray blue, like storm clouds gathering over the desert, and they studied her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I am well enough, thank you," Wilhelmina lied, straightening her spine even as her stomach growled audibly. The man glanced down at her worn dress, at the small bundle clutched in her hands, and then back to her face. His expression shifted from curiosity to understanding, and Wilhelmina felt her cheeks burn with humiliation. She knew what she must look like, a charity case or worse. "Name is Brooks Garrett," he said, removing his hat politely. "I run a ranch about 5 miles north of town, the Broken Arrow." "Wilhelmina Bennett," she replied automatically, though she was not sure why she was giving her name to a stranger. Brooks Garrett replaced his hat and studied her for another long moment. "Miss Bennett, I do not mean to be forward, but you look like someone who has just arrived with nowhere to go." "Am I wrong?" Wilhelmina wanted to lie to preserve some dignity, but what was the point? "You are not wrong," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I came to work for Mrs. Sullivan, but she has passed. I have no other prospects here." Brooks nodded slowly as though he had expected this answer. "Can you read and write?" "Yes, of course," Wilhelmina said, surprised by the question. "Can you keep accounts, numbers and such?" "I kept my father's books for his pharmacy for 6 years," Wilhelmina replied, "until his death 3 weeks ago." Brooks Garrett's expression softened slightly, sympathy flickering in those gray-blue eyes. "I am sorry for your loss." He paused, seeming to make a decision. "Miss Bennett, I have a proposition for you. My ranch needs someone to manage the household accounts and help my sister with correspondence. She is 14 and bright, but struggles with reading due to poor eyesight. The position would include room and board in the main house, separate quarters naturally, and a fair wage. It is respectable work." Wilhelmina stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "You would offer me employment, just like that? You know nothing about me." "I know you are educated, which is rare enough out here," Brooks said. "I know you are honest enough to admit your situation rather than spin tales. And I know that anyone who travels this far on the promise of work has the kind of determination I respect." He tilted his head slightly. "I also know that leaving a woman stranded in Vulture City with no money and no prospects is not something I can do in good conscience." Something in his tone made Wilhelmina look at him more closely. This was not pity, she realized. This was genuine respect and concern. "I would be very grateful for such an opportunity, Mr. Garrett," she said carefully. "But I must be honest with you as well. I know nothing of ranch life. I was raised in the city. The accounts are the accounts whether they are for a pharmacy or a ranch," Brooks replied with a slight smile that transformed his serious face into something almost handsome. "The rest you will learn. My sister Rebecca needs help with her studies, and I need someone I can trust to manage the household finances while I focus on the cattle and horses." He gestured toward the general store. "Let us get you some proper supplies first. You will need suitable clothing for ranch work and the heat." "Mr. Garrett, I cannot accept charity," Wilhelmina protested, even as her heart leaped at the thought of a new dress. Shoes without holes, perhaps even a bonnet. Brooks shook his head. "Not charity. An advance on your wages, you will work it off. Besides," he added, his tone becoming firmer, "I will clothe you in respect, Miss Bennett. Nobody who works for me walks around in rags. It reflects poorly on the ranch and on you. People need to know you are a valued member of the Broken Arrow household, not some beggar I picked up off the street." The words struck Wilhelmina with unexpected force. "I will clothe you in respect. Not just fabric and thread, but dignity. Recognition of her worth as a person." She felt tears prick at her eyes and blinked them back rapidly. "That is very kind of you," she managed. "It is practical," Brooks corrected, though his eyes were warm. "Come on. Martha Hutchins runs the store and she stocks ready-made clothing. We can get you outfitted properly." Wilhelmina followed him into the general store, a large building packed with everything from mining equipment to bolts of fabric to barrels of flour and sugar. A plump woman with graying hair looked up from behind the counter and smiled at Brooks. "Brooks Garrett, as I live and breathe," she said cheerfully. "What brings you to town on a Thursday?" "Business, Martha," Brooks replied. "This is Miss Wilhelmina Bennett. She will be working at the Broken Arrow, managing accounts and helping Rebecca with her studies. She needs proper work clothes and anything else a woman might need for ranch living." Martha's eyebrows rose, but she was too experienced a businesswoman to ask impolite questions. Instead, she turned her assessing gaze to Wilhelmina and nodded. "Come with me, dear. Let us see what we can find in your size." For the next hour, Wilhelmina was outfitted with 2 practical cotton dresses in sturdy fabric, one brown and one dark green, along with a riding skirt, 3 shirtwaists, a proper corset, new undergarments, 2 pairs of stockings, sturdy boots, a wide-brimmed hat for sun protection, and a woolen shawl for cool evenings. Martha added a hairbrush, pins, and ribbons without being asked, along with a small mirror and a bar of lavender soap. "Every woman needs these things," Martha said firmly when Wilhelmina protested. She lowered her voice so Brooks, who was examining saddle equipment on the other side of the store, could not hear. "Brooks Garrett is one of the good ones, dear. You are safe with him. He has been running that ranch alone since his father died 2 years ago, raising his young sister and managing 50 head of cattle and twice that many horses. He is honest and hardworking, and he treats people fairly. You have landed in a good situation." Wilhelmina nodded, grateful for the reassurance. She changed into one of the new dresses in the back room, a simple brown cotton with small white buttons down the front, and when she emerged, she felt like a different person. The dress fit properly, the fabric crisp and clean against her skin, and the new boots, though stiff, did not pinch her toes. She had tied her auburn hair back with one of the ribbons, and for the first time in weeks, she felt almost like herself again. Brooks looked up when she approached, and something flickered in his eyes, too quick for her to identify. "Much better," he said simply. "You look like a respectable ranch employee now." Martha tallied the purchases, and Wilhelmina felt faint when she heard the total: $23. It would take her months to repay that. But Brooks handed over the cash without hesitation and arranged for Martha to hold the packages until he could bring the wagon around. They walked back into the blazing afternoon sun, and Brooks gestured toward the livery stable. "My horse is there. I will get him in the wagon. We can load your things and head to the ranch. It is about an hour's ride." "Mr. Garrett," Wilhelmina said, stopping him with a hand on his arm. She withdrew it immediately, aware of the impropriety, but he had paused, looking at her attentively. "Why are you doing this? Truly? You could have ridden past me on the street and thought nothing of it." Brooks was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. 3 years ago my mother died of influenza," he said finally. "Before she passed, she made me promise to look after Rebecca, to make sure she had opportunities, education, and a good life. I promised her I would." He looked back at Wilhelmina. "When I saw you standing there in your worn dress with that lost look on your face, I thought about what might happen if Rebecca ever found herself alone in the world. I would hope someone would help her. So I am helping you. It is as simple as that." It was not simple at all, Wilhelmina thought. It was extraordinary, but she simply nodded and said, "Then I will work very hard to prove worthy of your trust, Mr. Garrett." "I believe you will, Miss Bennett," he replied. The ride to the Broken Arrow Ranch took them north out of Vulture City, following a rough trail through sagebrush and mesquite. The landscape was harsh but beautiful in its own way, all golden browns and dusty greens under the vast blue dome of sky. Brooks drove the wagon with easy competence, pointing out landmarks as they went. "That is Vulture Peak to the west," he said, indicating a distinctive mountain formation. "The mine that made this town is in those hills. I worked there for 6 months when I first came to Arizona, saving every penny to buy the ranch land." He glanced at her. "Where are you from originally?" "St. Louis," Wilhelmina replied. "My father owned a pharmacy there. It was a good life until he became ill." She paused, then decided this man had earned honesty. He had a weakness for gambling. "When he died, I discovered he had borrowed money against the business and our home. Everything was taken to settle the debts." Brooks nodded, his expression sympathetic but not pitying. Life deals hard hands sometimes. What matters is how you play them. And how do you think I am playing mine? Wilhelmina asked, surprising herself with her boldness. Brooks smiled, that transformation of his face again that made him seem younger and more approachable. I think you got on that stagecoach heading into unknown territory with nothing but hope and determination. That takes courage, Miss Bennett. Plenty of people would have given up. The ranch came into view as they crested a low rise, and Wilhelmina felt her breath catch. It was not a grand establishment, but it was solid and well maintained. The main house was built of adobe and wood, single story with a wide porch that wrapped around the front. There was a barn, several corrals, and a few outbuildings scattered across the property. Trees had been planted around the house, providing precious shade, and she could see a vegetable garden to one side. "It is not much," Brooks said, a note of pride in his voice despite his modest words. "But it is ours, free and clear. 50 acres of deeded land, another 200 we lease for grazing. We run cattle and breed horses, mostly Mustangs with some thoroughbred blood mixed in for refinement." "It is lovely," Wilhelmina said honestly. A young girl came running out of the house as they pulled up, her dark hair flying behind her. She had the same gray-blue eyes as Brooks and a smattering of freckles across her nose. "Brooks, you are back early. I did not expect you until supper." She stopped short when she saw Wilhelmina, curiosity lighting her face. "Who is this?" "Rebecca, this is Miss Wilhelmina Bennett," Brooks said as he climbed down from the wagon and then offered his hand to help Wilhelmina down. "She is going to be living here and helping with the accounts and your lessons." Rebecca's face broke into a wide smile. "Really? Oh, that is wonderful. Brooks has been trying to teach me sums, but he gets frustrated when I cannot read the numbers properly, and then we both end up cross with each other." She turned to Wilhelmina with disarming openness. "I am very glad you are here, Miss Bennett." "Please call me Wilhelmina," she said, charmed by the girl's enthusiasm. "Or Willa if you prefer." "Willa," Rebecca repeated, testing the name. "I like it. Come inside and I will show you where you will stay. Brooks, should I put her in the room next to mine?" "That would be perfect," Brooks agreed. He began unloading packages from the wagon. "Rebecca, help Miss Bennett get settled. I need to check on the horses and speak with Jose about the north fence." Rebecca took Wilhelmina's hand with unconscious friendliness and led her into the house. The interior was simple but comfortable, with whitewashed walls and good solid furniture. The main room served as both kitchen and living space, with a large table, a cast-iron stove, and several well-worn chairs. Doorways led off to what Wilhelmina assumed were bedrooms. "This was Mother and Father's room, but Brooks uses it now," Rebecca explained, pointing to one door. "That is my room, and this one," she opened another door, "will be yours." The room was small but clean, with a single bed covered in a patchwork quilt, a dresser with a wash basin and pitcher, and a window that looked out toward the mountains. It was more than Wilhelmina had dared hope for. "It is perfect," she said, setting down her bundle and the packages Brooks had brought in. "Thank you, Rebecca." "Are you really going to help me with reading?" Rebecca asked, hovering in the doorway. "I want to be able to read whole books, but the letters get jumbled sometimes and I get awful headaches." "I will help you as much as I can," Wilhelmina promised. "We shall take it slowly and find what works best for you." Rebecca beamed. "I think I am going to like having another woman in the house. Brooks tries, but he does not understand things like hair ribbons and whether a dress is pretty or just practical." Wilhelmina laughed, and it felt good after so many days of worry and grief. "I can imagine. Go on, let me unpack, and then perhaps you can show me around the property before supper." "Yes." Rebecca agreed enthusiastically and disappeared down the hallway. Wilhelmina sat down on the bed, her hands trembling slightly as the reality of her situation finally caught up with her. This morning she had been desperate and alone. Now she had a roof over her head, new clothes, employment, and what seemed to be a welcoming household. It was almost too much good fortune to believe. She unpacked her few belongings, hanging the new dresses carefully in the small wardrobe and arranging her toiletries on the dresser. The room might be simple, but it was clean and private, and it was hers. She looked at herself in the small mirror, hardly recognizing the neat, properly dressed woman who stared back. The haunted look was already fading from her eyes. A knock on the doorframe made her turn. Brooks stood there, hat in hand. "I wanted to make sure you have everything you need. If there is anything else, just ask Rebecca or tell me tonight at supper." "This is more than enough," Wilhelmina said. "Mr. Garrett, I do not know how to thank you properly." Brooks shook his head. "No thanks needed. You will earn your keep, I assure you. The account books are a mess, and Rebecca needs patient teaching. You will have plenty to do." He paused. "There is one more thing. Tomorrow is Saturday, and some of the neighboring ranchers and their families usually gather for a meal and socializing. You are welcome to join us, and it would be good for people to meet you in a proper setting. Folks around here can be suspicious of newcomers, but if they see you are part of the Broken Arrow household, they will accept you." "I would be honored," Wilhelmina said. "Good." Brooks nodded and turned to leave, then paused. "Miss Bennett, Willa, you are safe here. I want you to know that. You have my word as a gentleman and a Christian that you will be treated with complete respect in this house." Wilhelmina felt unexpected tears prick her eyes again. "Thank you," she whispered. After he left, she stood by the window and looked out at the harsh, beautiful landscape of Arizona. 3 weeks ago, her life had fallen apart. Now, impossibly, it seemed to be rebuilding itself in this unlikely place. She sent up a silent prayer of gratitude and then went to find Rebecca for that tour of the property. The next few days fell into a comfortable rhythm. Wilhelmina woke with the sun, helped Rebecca prepare breakfast, and then spent the mornings going through the ranch accounts. Brooks had not exaggerated. The books were indeed a mess, with entries scrawled in various handwriting, dates out of order, and calculations that did not add up. She set about organizing everything systematically, creating new ledgers with clear columns for income and expenses. In the afternoons, she worked with Rebecca on reading and arithmetic. The girl was right about her difficulties. The letters seemed to swim on the page for her, and she often confused similar-looking words. But she was bright and eager to learn, and Wilhelmina discovered that if she used larger print and had Rebecca trace the letters with her finger, the girl could manage better. They practiced for an hour each day, never longer, to avoid the headaches. Brooks was often out working on the ranch, but Wilhelmina saw him at mealtimes, and she found herself looking forward to those encounters more than was probably proper. He was an easy man to talk to, with a dry sense of humor and a genuine interest in others. He asked her about St. Louis and listened attentively to her stories of city life, in turn telling her about his journey from Texas to Arizona and the challenges of building a ranch from nothing. "My father was a dreamer," Brooks explained over supper one evening. "He heard about gold in Arizona and dragged the whole family out here when I was 16. Spent 2 years chasing a strike that never came, while Mother struggled to keep us fed. When he finally admitted defeat, he used the last of our savings to buy this land. He said if we were going to be poor, we might as well be poor doing honest work." "He sounds like a wise man," Wilhelmina said. "In the end, yes," Brooks agreed. "Though it took him a while to get there. He and I worked this ranch together for 5 years before he died." Heart gave out one day while we were mending fences. He was 46 years old. His expression darkened briefly. Mother only lasted a year after that. I think she died of a broken heart as much as the influenza. Rebecca, who had heard this story many times, reached over and squeezed her brother's hand. But we are doing well now. Father would be proud. I hope so, Brooks said quietly. Saturday arrived bright and hot, and Wilhelmina dressed carefully in her green dress and new boots, pinning her auburn hair up in a neat bun. Rebecca was beside herself with excitement, chattering about who would be attending and what food they should bring. There will be the Harrisons from the Triple H Ranch, Rebecca explained as she helped Wilhelmina pack a basket with the biscuits and dried apple pie they had made that morning. Mr. Harrison is gruff but nice. His wife Martha died last year, so it is just him and his 2 sons now. Then there are the Coopers. They have 5 children and run sheep, which some of the cattle ranchers look down on, but Brooks says that is foolish prejudice. Oh, and the Waltons might come, though Mrs. Walton just had a baby, so maybe not. The gathering was at the Cooper Ranch, about 3 miles east. When they arrived, Wilhelmina was surprised to see about 20 people already there, adults and children mixing in the shade of a large ramada. Several women looked at her with frank curiosity, and she felt a flutter of nervousness. She was the newcomer here, the outsider. Brooks seemed to sense her discomfort because he stayed close as he made introductions. "This is Miss Wilhelmina Bennett," he said to each group. "She is managing the Broken Arrow accounts and helping Rebecca with her studies. She comes to us from St. Louis." The women were cautiously friendly, asking polite questions about her journey and her impressions of Arizona. The men tipped their hats and then largely ignored her, which suited Wilhelmina fine. She found herself drawn into conversation with Sarah Cooper, the wife of the sheep rancher, who was a warm, practical woman with laugh lines around her eyes. "It is good that Brooks has help," Sarah said as they set out food on a long table. "That man works himself to the bone trying to do everything, and poor Rebecca needs a woman's influence. She is a sweet girl, but she is at that age where she needs guidance." Sarah gave Wilhelmina a knowing look. "Brooks is a good man, you know." Plenty of women in these parts have set their caps at him. Wilhelmina felt her cheeks warm. "I am only his employee, Mrs. Cooper." "Of course, dear," Sarah said with a smile that suggested she did not quite believe that would remain the case. "Of course." The afternoon passed pleasantly. The men talked about cattle prices and water rights. The women exchanged recipes and remedies, and the children played noisy games in the dust. Wilhelmina helped serve food and found herself relaxing as people accepted her presence without much fuss. This was a community that understood hard work and valued competence, and they seemed willing to give her a chance. She was helping clean up after the meal when a commotion near the horse corral drew everyone's attention. One of the Cooper boys, perhaps 10 years old, had climbed onto a horse that clearly did not appreciate the attention. The animal was bucking and snorting, and the boy was clinging desperately to its mane, his face white with fear. Brooks moved faster than Wilhelmina would have thought possible. He vaulted the fence, grabbed the horse's bridle, and spoke in a low, calm voice that somehow cut through the animal's panic. Within moments, the horse had stilled, and Brooks was lifting the shaking boy down to safety. "You all right, Tommy?" Brooks asked, checking the boy for injuries. Tommy nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I am sorry, Mr. Garrett. I just wanted to see if I could ride him." "That is a green broke Mustang," Brooks said firmly but not unkindly. "Not a horse for a child, you understand. You could have been badly hurt." Sarah Cooper rushed over and swept her son into her arms, thanking Brooks profusely. The incident cast a brief pall over the gathering, But soon everyone was talking and laughing again, though Tommy stayed close to his mother for the rest of the afternoon. On the ride home, Rebecca fell asleep in the back of the wagon, worn out from playing with the Cooper children. Wilhelmina sat beside Brooks on the bench, watching the sun sink toward the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. "That was impressive, what you did with the horse," she said quietly. Brooks shrugged. "Part of working with animals is understanding them. That horse was scared, not mean. He just needed someone to calm him down." "You are very good at that," Wilhelmina observed. "Calming things down, I mean." "Animals, people, situations." He glanced at her, a slight smile playing at his lips. "Is that your polite way of saying I am boring?" "Not at all," Wilhelmina said quickly. "I mean you have a steadiness about you. It is comforting." She felt her cheeks warm again. "That probably sounds foolish." "No," Brooks said softly. "It does not sound foolish at all." They rode in companionable silence for a while, and Wilhelmina found herself very aware of Brooks's presence beside her, the way his hands held the reins with casual competence, the way his profile looked against the sunset sky. She caught herself and looked away firmly. She was his employee, nothing more. It would be foolish and dangerous to think otherwise. But as the days turned into weeks, Wilhelmina found it increasingly difficult to maintain that emotional distance. Brooks was unfailingly respectful, but she noticed the way his eyes would linger on her sometimes, the way he seemed to find excuses to talk to her in the evenings after Rebecca had gone to bed. They would sit on the porch in the relative cool of the desert night, discussing the ranch business or books they had read or dreams they had once held. "I wanted to be a teacher," Wilhelmina confessed one evening. "When I was young, I thought I would go to normal school and teach in a proper academy. But Father needed help in the pharmacy, and then there was never money for schooling." "You are teaching now," Brooks pointed out. "Rebecca has improved remarkably in just these few weeks. She actually read an entire page yesterday without stopping." Wilhelmina smiled. "She is a wonderful student, so eager and determined." "She likes you," Brooks said. "She told me yesterday that you are the sister she always wished for." He paused. "I am glad you came to Vulture City, Willa. I know the circumstances were difficult, but I cannot help feeling it was meant to be." Wilhelmina looked at him, her heart beating faster. "I am glad I came too," she said quietly. Something passed between them in that moment, an acknowledgement of feelings neither was quite ready to voice. Brooks cleared his throat and stood up. "I should check on the horses one more time before bed. Good night, Willa." "Good night, Brooks." She watched him walk toward the barn, his tall figure silhouetted against the star-filled sky, and she knew with absolute certainty that she was falling in love with him. The realization should have frightened her, but instead, it filled her with a warm, hopeful sensation she had not felt in years. The summer deepened, and life at the Broken Arrow took on the quality of a dream Wilhelmina never wanted to wake from. She had established herself firmly as part of the household, managing not just the accounts but much of the domestic work as well. She and Rebecca worked together in the garden, preserving vegetables for the winter ahead. She learned to bake bread in the temperamental wood stove and to make the simple, hearty meals that sustained ranch life. She even learned to ride, though not particularly well, sitting astride one of the gentler horses while Brooks gave her patient instruction. "You are too stiff," he said one afternoon as she bounced uncomfortably in the saddle. "You need to move with the horse, not against him. Here." He rode up beside her and placed one hand gently on her back. "Relax your spine. Let your hips follow the motion." Wilhelmina tried to follow his instruction, but all she could focus on was the warmth of his hand through the fabric of her dress. When she finally found the rhythm and the ride smoothed out, Brooks's face lit up with genuine pleasure. "There you go. You are a natural rider, Willa. Just needed to trust yourself." She was breathless and not entirely from the exertion of riding. "Thank you for your patience. I know I must be a terrible student." "Not at all," Brooks said warmly. "You work harder than anyone I know. You have transformed this place, you know. The accounts are organized, Rebecca is thriving, the house is actually clean and comfortable now. I do not know how we managed before you came." "You managed perfectly well," Wilhelmina protested, but she was pleased by his words. "We survived," Brooks corrected. "Now we are living. There is a difference." That night, after Rebecca had gone to bed, Brooks asked Wilhelmina to look at the books with him. They sat together at the kitchen table, the ledger open between them, and Wilhelmina walked him through the month's finances. The ranch was doing well. They had sold several horses at good prices, and the cattle were healthy and multiplying. "At this rate, you will be able to expand next year," Wilhelmina said, pointing to her calculations. "Perhaps hire another hand or two, increase the herd." "Maybe," Brooks said, but he sounded distracted. When Wilhelmina looked up, she found him watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Willa, I need to tell you something." Her heart began to pound. "Yes." Brooks took a deep breath. "These past weeks, having you here, it has been the happiest I have been since before my parents died. You have brought light and order and warmth to this place. But more than that, you have brought joy to my life." He reached across the table and took her hand gently. "I know you are my employee, and I know this is improper, but I cannot keep pretending I do not care for you. I have come to care for you deeply, Willa, more than I have any right to." Wilhelmina felt tears spring to her eyes. "Brooks, I care for you too, so much that it frightens me sometimes." His face transformed with relief and happiness. "Truly, truly," she whispered. Brooks stood and came around the table, drawing her gently to her feet. He cupped her face in his calloused hands with infinite tenderness. "May I kiss you?" In answer, Wilhelmina rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was soft and sweet, full of promise and restrained passion. When they finally drew apart, Brooks rested his forehead against hers. "I want to court you properly," he said. "I want to do this right. Will you let me?" "Yes," Wilhelmina said, laughing through her happy tears. "Yes, absolutely yes." They kept their courtship relatively private at first, not wanting to cause gossip or make Rebecca uncomfortable. But Rebecca, perceptive as always, figured it out within days. "You and Brooks are in love, are you not?" she asked Wilhelmina one morning as they worked in the garden. Wilhelmina felt her cheeks flame. "What makes you say that?" "The way you look at each other," Rebecca said matter-of-factly. "And he whistles now when he works. He never whistles." She grinned. "I think it is wonderful. Does this mean you will stay forever? Please say you will stay forever." "I am not going anywhere," Wilhelmina promised, hugging the girl. "Good," Rebecca said firmly. "Because you belong here now, you belong with us." The courtship progressed through the late summer and into fall. Brooks was attentive and romantic in ways that surprised Wilhelmina. He brought her wildflowers from the desert, taught her the names of the stars in the vast Arizona sky, and listened to her thoughts and dreams with genuine interest. They took long rides together in the cooler evenings, exploring the land around the ranch, and talked about everything and nothing. "I never thought I would fall in love with a rancher," Wilhelmina admitted one evening as they sat together watching the sunset. "I always imagined I would marry some respectable merchant or clerk in the city." "Disappointed?" Brooks asked, a teasing note in his voice. "Not even slightly," Wilhelmina said, leaning against his shoulder. "This life is harder than anything I imagined, but it is also richer. Every day means something here. Every task matters. And being with you," she paused, choosing her words carefully, "being with you feels like coming home." Brooks kissed the top of her head gently. "I love you, Willa Bennett. I have loved you since the day you stepped down from that stagecoach looking lost and determined all at once. I want to spend my life with you if you will have me." Wilhelmina turned to look at him, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "Are you proposing to me, Brooks Garrett?" "I am," he said seriously. "I know I should wait longer, follow all the proper conventions, but life is too uncertain out here to waste time. Marry me, Willa. Be my wife. Help me build this ranch into something wonderful. Grow old with me under these stars." "Yes," Wilhelmina said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, I will marry you. I love you so much." They were married on a crisp October morning in 1878 by the circuit preacher who came through Vulture City once a month. The ceremony was simple, held in the main room of the Broken Arrow Ranch house, with Rebecca as maid of honor and Tom Harrison, one of the neighbor boys, as Brooks's best man. Sarah Cooper had helped Wilhelmina make a new dress for the occasion, a beautiful soft blue cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs. Rebecca wove wildflowers into Wilhelmina's auburn hair, and when Brooks saw her, his eyes filled with tears. "You are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen," he whispered as they stood together before the preacher. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Brooks kissed Wilhelmina with such tenderness and joy that everyone present felt their eyes mist. A celebration followed, with all the neighboring ranch families bringing food and music. Someone produced a fiddle, and they danced in the yard until the stars came out. Later, after the guests had departed and Rebecca had been tucked into bed with much giggling and knowing looks, Brooks carried Wilhelmina over the threshold of their bedroom. He set her down gently and took both her hands in his. "I promise to spend every day of my life making you happy," he said solemnly. "You came to me with nothing but that worn dress and a fierce determination to survive. I vowed that day to clothe you in respect, and I meant it. But Willa, you have given me so much more. You have given me love, partnership, and purpose. You have made our house a home. I do not know what I did to deserve you, but I will spend the rest of my life being worthy of you." Wilhelmina cupped his face in her hands, this good, strong man who had seen her at her lowest and offered not pity but genuine respect and opportunity. "You saved me, Brooks, not just from destitution, but from despair. You saw value in me when I had almost forgotten I had any. You gave me a place to belong and the freedom to become who I was meant to be. I love you with everything I am." Their wedding night was gentle and sweet, full of whispered words and tender discoveries. Afterward, lying in Brooks's arms, Wilhelmina looked through the window at the stars and sent up a prayer of gratitude for the strange and wonderful path that had led her to this moment. The years that followed were not easy, for ranch life never was, but they were rich and full. Wilhelmina had a gift for management, and under her careful stewardship, the Broken Arrow prospered. They expanded the herd, added new breeding stock, and built a reputation for quality horses throughout the territory. Brooks's skill with animals and Wilhelmina's business acumen proved to be a powerful combination. Rebecca blossomed under their care, eventually learning to read well enough to devour every book they could acquire. When she turned 16, she announced her intention to become a teacher herself, and Brooks and Wilhelmina proudly sent her to normal school in Prescott. She came home every summer to help on the ranch, full of stories about her studies and plans for the future. In the spring of 1880, Wilhelmina gave birth to their first child, a robust boy with his father's gray-blue eyes and his mother's auburn hair. They named him William, after Wilhelmina's father, and Brooks was an utterly devoted parent, walking the floor with the baby at night and teaching him to ride almost as soon as he could walk. 2 years later, twin girls arrived, Alice and Emma, who filled the house with laughter and chaos. Wilhelmina discovered that she loved being a mother, loved watching Brooks with their children. The way his stern exterior melted completely when one of the twins climbed into his lap, or William asked him to explain something about the ranch. "We are building something here," Brooks said one evening as they sat on the porch watching William, now 4 years old, attempt to help feed the chickens while the twins toddled after him. "Not just a ranch, but a legacy, a family, a good life built on honest work and real love." Wilhelmina took his hand, marveling as she always did at how rough and calloused it was from years of hard labor, yet how gentle it could be. "I think of that girl who stepped off the stagecoach 6 years ago," she said. "How lost and frightened she was, how certain she was that her life was over." "And now?" Brooks asked, though he was smiling because he knew the answer. "And now I know that it was just beginning," Wilhelmina said. She looked at her husband, at their children playing in the golden evening light, at the ranch they had built together through sweat and determination and love. "You told me once that you would clothe me in respect, and you have. But you have given me so much more than that. You have given me dignity, purpose, family, and a love deeper than I ever dreamed possible." Brooks pulled her close and kissed her forehead. "We gave those things to each other, Willa. That is what partnership means." As the sun set over the Arizona mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of rose and gold, Wilhelmina felt a profound sense of peace and gratitude. Life in the Wild West was hard, demanding, and often unforgiving. But it was also magnificent, full of beauty and possibility for those brave enough to reach for it. She had arrived in Vulture City with nothing but a worn dress and desperate hope. She had found, in the most unexpected of places, a man who saw not her poverty but her potential, who offered not charity but genuine respect and opportunity. Together, they had built a life of meaning and deep connection, had created a family filled with love and laughter. In the years to come, there would be challenges. Droughts would test the ranch's resources, illness would worry them, and the changing times would require constant adaptation. But they would face it all together, side by side. Two people who had found each other in the dusty streets of a rough mining town and had chosen each other every day since. Rebecca returned from normal school in 1883 with her teaching certificate and took a position in Vulture City's new schoolhouse. She married a young doctor who came to town that same year, and they built their home on land Brooks and Wilhelmina gifted them. The children called their Aunt Rebecca every Sunday for dinner, filling the Broken Arrow ranch house with the noise and energy of extended family. William grew into a serious, responsible young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did. At 12, he was already invaluable help with the cattle and horses, showing the same natural gift with animals that Brooks possessed. The twins were bright and curious, constantly getting into mischief, but also showing early signs of their mother's head for numbers. Emma was particularly fascinated by the account books and would sit with Wilhelmina for hours, learning to track expenses and income. In the spring of 1886, Wilhelmina discovered she was pregnant again. She was 31 now, and this pregnancy felt different from the others, harder on her body. Brooks was immediately protective, insisting she rest more and delegate the heavier household tasks. "I am not fragile," Wilhelmina protested one afternoon when Brooks tried to take the laundry basket from her hands. "No, you are the strongest person I know," Brooks agreed. "But you are carrying our child, and I will not risk either of you. Let Alice and Emma help with the laundry. They are old enough now." The baby arrived in late October, another boy. They named him James, and he was the image of Wilhelmina, with her delicate features and bright green eyes. Brooks held his newest son with the same wonder and reverence he had shown with each of their children, and Wilhelmina felt her heart overflow with love for this good man who had become everything to her. As James grew from infant to toddler, the ranch continued to prosper. They now ran nearly 200 head of cattle and had become known throughout the territory for their quality quarter horses. The original 50 acres had expanded to 300 through careful purchases, and they employed 3 full-time ranch hands, including Jose Martinez, who had been with them almost from the beginning. The house itself had grown too. Brooks had added 2 more bedrooms and a proper dining room, along with a separate kitchen building to keep the heat away from the living quarters during the brutal summer months. There was even a small library now, shelves lined with books that Brooks and Wilhelmina collected whenever they went to town. Education and learning remained important to them both, and they made sure their children understood the value of knowledge. On Wilhelmina's 33rd birthday, Brooks surprised her with a buggy trip to Prescott, just the 2 of them. Rebecca had agreed to watch the children for 3 days, and they made the journey north through landscapes that took Wilhelmina's breath away. Prescott was the territorial capital, a real city with paved streets, brick buildings, and culture. They stayed in a proper hotel, attended a theater performance, and dined in restaurants with white tablecloths and candles. "This is wonderful," Wilhelmina said over dinner that first evening, "but it feels strange to be away from the children and the ranch." Brooks reached across the table and took her hand. "We have built a good life, Willa, but it is important we remember that we are not just parents and ranchers. We are also a man and woman who love each other. I wanted to remind us both of that, away from the daily demands." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket and slid it across the table. Inside was a delicate gold locket, far finer than anything Wilhelmina had ever owned. "Brooks, this is too much," she protested, though her eyes filled with tears as she examined the intricate engraving. "Open it," he urged. Inside were 2 tiny photographs, recent ones taken by the traveling photographer who had come through Vulture City the previous month. One showed Brooks with the 4 children, the other showed Wilhelmina with them. On the opposite sides were locks of hair, one from each child. "So you can carry them with you always," Brooks said softly. "And so you remember how far we have come. You arrived in Arizona with nothing but a worn dress and determination. Now look at what you have built. Look at who you are. The respected wife of a successful rancher, mother of 4 wonderful children, a woman known throughout this territory for her kindness and capability." Wilhelmina could not speak through her tears. Brooks came around the table and knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "I meant what I said that first day," he continued. "I wanted to clothe you in respect to make sure the world saw your worth. But Willa, you already had that worth. You always did. I just wanted to make sure you had the opportunity to show it." Wilhelmina pulled him close, not caring that they were in a public restaurant. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you more than words can possibly express. You gave me a life I never dreamed I could have. You gave me yourself." That night in their hotel room, they made love with the passion and tenderness of 2 people who knew each other completely, whose bodies and souls had intertwined over years of shared life. Afterward, Wilhelmina lay in Brooks's arms and thought about the strange and wonderful journey that had brought them here. "You ever think about that day?" she asked. "When you saw me in front of the general store?" "All the time," Brooks admitted. "I almost did not stop. I had business to attend to, things to do in town. But something made me pause. Maybe it was the way you were standing there, so determined not to show fear even though you were clearly terrified. Maybe it was divine intervention. I do not know, but I thank God every day that I stopped." "So do I," Wilhelmina said fervently. They returned to the ranch 3 days later to find everything running smoothly under Rebecca's capable management. The children swarmed them with hugs and excited chatter about everything that had happened while they were gone. William, now 10 years old, gave a serious report on the horses. The twins, 8, competed to tell the most dramatic version of how they had helped Aunt Rebecca bake a cake that collapsed in the middle. 4-year-old James simply clung to his mother's skirts, not wanting to let her out of his sight. As life settled back into its familiar rhythms, Wilhelmina reflected on how completely Arizona had become home. She rarely thought of St. Louis anymore except as a distant dream, a life that belonged to someone else. This was her real life, here in this harsh and beautiful land, with this man who saw her, truly saw her, and loved what he saw. The children grew and changed with each passing season. William developed into a fine horseman and began accompanying his father on longer trips to Prescott and Phoenix to sell their stock. The twins, while still prone to mischief, showed increasing responsibility. Emma indeed had her mother's gift for numbers and began keeping some of the simpler account books. Alice had inherited her father's way with animals and spent hours in the barn, doctoring injured creatures and gentling young horses. James, the baby, was bright and curious, always asking questions about everything. He wanted to know how things worked, why the desert bloomed after rain, where the stars came from. Brooks and Wilhelmina took turns answering his endless questions, nurturing his curiosity. In the summer of 1890, the family took a rare trip together to the Grand Canyon. William was 14 now, responsible enough to help drive the wagon. The twins were 12, and James was 8. It was a week-long journey, and Wilhelmina had worried about the logistics, but Brooks insisted. "Our children should see the wonders of this territory," he said. "They should understand what an amazing place they live in." Standing at the rim of the canyon with her family around her, Wilhelmina felt overwhelmed by the majesty of it. The vast chasm stretched before them, layers of rock in shades of red and gold and purple, carved over millennia by the power of water and time. It was humbling and magnificent. "It is like looking at forever," Emma said softly, unconsciously echoing her mother's thoughts. That night, camped under the stars, Brooks and Wilhelmina lay together in their bedroll while the children slept in their own nearby. The sky was a riot of stars, more than Wilhelmina had ever seen despite 12 years of Arizona nights. "Thank you," she whispered to Brooks. "For what?" "For giving me this, all of this. The life, the family, the beauty, the respect and love, everything." Brooks pulled her closer. "You gave me just as much, Willa. More maybe. You took a struggling ranch and a lonely man and a confused young girl and you made us into a family. You brought warmth and wisdom and grace to every corner of our lives. I am the one who should be thanking you." "Then we will thank each other," Wilhelmina said, "and call it even." "Deal," Brooks said and kissed her under the stars. The 1890s brought both prosperity and challenges. A severe drought in '93 tested their resources, and they lost some cattle, but careful management of their water sources and pastureland allowed them to survive better than many neighboring ranches. The national financial panic of that same year affected cattle prices, but their horse breeding business remained strong, carrying them through the difficult period. Through it all, Brooks and Wilhelmina remained each other's anchor and support. They made decisions together, pooling their different strengths and perspectives. When Brooks wanted to invest in new breeding stock despite the uncertain economy, Wilhelmina carefully reviewed the accounts and gave her approval. When Wilhelmina worried about money for the children's future education, Brooks reassured her that they had built something solid enough to weather any storm. William turned 18 in 1894 and announced his intention to marry Sarah Cooper's niece, Mary, a sweet girl with a level head and a good work ethic. Brooks and Wilhelmina gave their blessing and their approval, and the wedding was held at the Broken Arrow that summer. Watching her firstborn take his vows, Wilhelmina felt the bittersweet passage of time. Her baby was a man now, ready to build his own life. Brooks must have sensed her melancholy because he squeezed her hand during the ceremony and whispered, "We raised him well. He will be happy." And William was happy. He and Mary built a small house on the ranch property, and William took on more and more of the daily operations, allowing Brooks to step back slightly and enjoy his grandchildren when they began arriving. The first, a boy named Brooks William, arrived in 1895, and the second, a girl called Wilhelmina Sarah, followed in 1897. The twins finished their schooling and shocked everyone by announcing they wanted to open a mercantile business together in Vulture City. Brooks and Wilhelmina discussed it seriously and decided to back the venture. The girls had good business sense, they knew the community, and the town had grown large enough to support a proper store. "Are you sure you trust us with this?" Emma asked her mother as they went over the business plan. "Completely," Wilhelmina said. "You have your father's determination and my head for numbers. You will succeed." The mercantile Bennett and Bennett General Store opened in the spring of 1898 and quickly became a fixture in Vulture City. The twins had inherited their mother's warmth and their father's integrity, and people trusted them. Within 2 years, they had expanded, adding a section for ladies' clothing and accessories. James, meanwhile, showed an unexpected interest in medicine. At 12 years old, he was fascinated by anything related to healing, spending hours with Rebecca's husband, Dr. Lawrence, learning about anatomy and treatments. Brooks and Wilhelmina encouraged this passion, recognizing that not all their children needed to be ranchers. "He has a gift, Doctor," Lawrence told them one evening. "A real aptitude for medicine. If you can send him to university, he will make an excellent doctor." It was decided. James would continue his education with the goal of attending medical school. It would be expensive, but the ranch was prospering, and both Brooks and Wilhelmina believed deeply in education and opportunity. The new century arrived, and with it came changes both exciting and challenging. Arizona was moving toward statehood, and the wild frontier was slowly becoming more civilized. Automobiles began appearing on the streets of Prescott and Phoenix, though they remained rare and unreliable. Telephone lines were strung between major towns, and there was even talk of electricity coming to Vulture City. Through it all, the Broken Arrow remained a constant, a symbol of what could be built through hard work, integrity, and love. Brooks was now 49 years old, his dark hair streaked with gray, but still strong and vital. Wilhelmina was 45, and though the years had left their marks, she was still beautiful, her green eyes as bright and intelligent as ever. They celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary in October of 1903 with a massive party that brought together family and friends from across the territory. William and Mary came with their 4 children. The twins closed the store for the day to attend. James, now 17 and preparing to leave for university, helped organize everything. Rebecca and Dr. Lawrence brought their 3 children. The Coopers, the Harrisons, and dozens of other neighbors and friends filled the ranch. As Brooks and Wilhelmina stood together, surrounded by the evidence of their life's work, the children and grandchildren they had raised, the community they had helped build, they renewed their vows in front of everyone they loved. 25 years ago, Brooks said, his voice thick with emotion, I met a young woman who had lost everything but her dignity and determination. I offered her a job and a place to stay. What I did not know was that I was welcoming into my life the person who would transform it completely. Willa, you made me whole. You gave me purpose and joy and a family beyond my wildest dreams. I love you more today than I did on our wedding day, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. That is my promise to you, for as long as we both shall live. Wilhelmina was crying, as were many of the guests. Brooks, you saved me from more than just poverty. You saved me from hopelessness. You looked at a woman in a worn dress and saw someone worthy of respect, someone capable of building a life. You gave me not just opportunity but genuine partnership. You have been my best friend, my lover, my partner in everything. I am who I am because you believed in me before I believed in myself. I love you with everything I have, and I always will. They kissed as their children and grandchildren cheered, and the celebration continued late into the night with music, dancing, food, and laughter. It was, everyone agreed, a testament to what love and commitment could build over time. The following year, James left for university in California. It was hard for Wilhelmina to see her baby go, but she was proud beyond measure of the young man he had become. He wrote faithfully every week, sharing his experiences and studies, and came home each summer to help on the ranch and work with Dr. Lawrence. In 1908, tragedy struck when Rebecca died suddenly of a stroke at the age of 42. The loss devastated Brooks and Wilhelmina, who had watched Rebecca grow from a confused teenager into an accomplished woman, teacher, wife, and mother. They helped Dr. Lawrence and his children through their grief while dealing with their own. And once again, they were reminded of life's fragility and the importance of cherishing each day. But life continued, as it always does. James graduated from medical school in 1909 and returned to Arizona, opening a practice in Vulture City alongside the aging Dr. Lawrence. William and Mary's children were growing up on the ranch, learning the same lessons of hard work and integrity that their father had learned. The twins' mercantile business continued to thrive, and both women eventually married local men and started families of their own. Brooks and Wilhelmina, now in their 50s, gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operations of the ranch, though neither ever fully retired. They had earned their rest, but the ranch was too much a part of them to ever truly leave it. Instead, they enjoyed the slower pace, spending time with their grandchildren, reading together in the evenings, and taking long rides through the desert they had come to love. "You have any regrets?" Wilhelmina asked Brooks one evening as they sat on the porch, now enlarged and covered to provide more shade. They were in their 60s now, their hair gray, their faces lined with the years of hard living, but their love had only deepened. Brooks considered the question carefully. "I regret that my parents did not live to see what we built. I regret that Rebecca died so young. But in terms of the choices we made, the life we created, no regrets at all." "You," Wilhelmina smiled. "None, not a single one. Everything I lost in St. Louis, everything I suffered, it brought me here. To you, to this life. How could I regret that?" Arizona achieved statehood in 1912, and Brooks and Wilhelmina attended the celebration in Phoenix, marveling at how much the territory had changed since they first arrived. The Wild West they had known was fading into history, replaced by modern conveniences and established civilization. But the core values they had built their life on remained relevant: hard work, integrity, respect, and love. They celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary in 1918, as World War I raged overseas. Thankfully, their sons and grandsons were either too old or too young to be called to service. though the war still touched their lives through rationing and the changes it brought to the national economy. Through the 1920s, as the country experienced the upheaval of prohibition and the roaring economy, the Broken Arrow remained a steady presence. It was now primarily managed by William and his sons, though Brooks still offered advice and assistance when needed. The ranch had expanded to nearly 500 acres, ran close to 400 head of cattle, and maintained its reputation for quality horses. Brooks and Wilhelmina spent their later years surrounded by a large, loving, extended family. They had 4 children, 12 grandchildren, and eventually 19 great-grandchildren. Every Sunday, as many family members as could make it gathered at the Broken Arrow for dinner, the big table that had once seated just Brooks, Rebecca, and Wilhelmina now surrounded by multiple generations. On Wilhelmina's 70th birthday in 1925, the family threw a massive celebration. Sitting in a comfortable chair with grandchildren playing at her feet and great-grandchildren toddling around, she looked at Brooks and felt overwhelming gratitude. "Quite a journey from that dusty street in Vulture City," Brooks said softly, reading her thoughts as he so often did. "Quite a journey," Wilhelmina agreed, "and I would do it all again in a heartbeat." Brooks Garrett died peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1928 at the age of 77. He simply did not wake up one morning, lying beside the woman he had loved for nearly 50 years. Wilhelmina woke to find him gone, and though her heart broke, she found comfort in knowing he had lived a full, meaningful life and had died peacefully. The funeral brought hundreds of people from across Arizona. Brooks had been a respected figure in the community, known for his fairness, integrity, and generosity. But more than that, he had been a beloved husband, father, grandfather, and great-grandfather. The stories shared at his wake painted a picture of a man who had lived his values every single day, who had treated everyone with respect regardless of their station, and who had built something meaningful through hard work and dedication. Wilhelmina grieved deeply, but not bitterly. She had been blessed with 49 years of marriage to a good man, had raised 4 wonderful children, and had built a life rich in love and meaning. She continued living at the ranch, now cared for by William and Mary, surrounded by family. She spent her remaining years writing down her story, wanting her grandchildren and great-grandchildren to understand how it had all begun. She wrote about arriving in Vulture City with nothing but a worn dress, about a cowboy who had promised to clothe her in respect, and about how that simple act of kindness had blossomed into the most beautiful love story she could have imagined. Wilhelmina Bennett Garrett died in her sleep in 1932, at the age of 77, joining the man she had loved for more than half a century. She was laid to rest beside Brooks on a hill overlooking the Broken Arrow Ranch, with a headstone that read, "Together they built a legacy of love, respect, and family. Together they rest in peace." The Broken Arrow Ranch continued through the generations, passed down through William's line, a testament to what 2 people could build when they combined hard work, integrity, and genuine love. The story of how it began, of a destitute woman in a worn dress and a cowboy who saw her worth, became family legend, told and retold to each new generation as a reminder of where they came from and the values on which their family was founded. In the end, it was a simple story, really. A woman who had lost everything found the courage to keep moving forward. A man who could have ridden past chose instead to stop and help. 2 people who might have remained employer and employee chose instead to see each other truly and fall in love. And from that simple beginning, they built something extraordinary, a life of meaning, purpose, and deep connection that rippled outward through generations, touching countless lives. The worn dress Wilhelmina had arrived in, carefully preserved, remained in the family for decades, a tangible reminder of humble beginnings and the transformative power of respect, kindness, and love. And every person who heard the story understood the fundamental truth at its heart, that every person has inherent worth and dignity, regardless of their circumstances, and that recognizing and honoring that worth in others can change everything.